It would be 2022 when you forget to unmic yourself, right? How could you start a virtual summit without going mute? So welcome from the National Foreign Language Center. Welcome to the 2022 Virtual Summit, an event that came out of necessity 2 years ago when the world shut down and all of our regional conferences disappeared. And we wanted to continue that tradition as we find ourselves once again talking about issues and a changing landscape, and what is really happening. So my computer is going crazy this morning, so a lot of practice. But welcome. We are here to kick off our summit. We have an exciting day for you. We're starting this morning with a live keynote address, followed by 2 live podcast recordings where you can kind of be fly on the wall and listen in, but also participate in the conversation. We have a live presentation this afternoon at 1 o'clock Eastern time, and then a question, an Ask Me Anything kind of question about that we're calling Tell Me More. But I don't want to delay anything any further. And I'm really excited and honored to introduce you to this morning's speaker, who is our current ACTFL Teacher of the Year. And we are so thrilled to have her here. So good morning, Heather.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm great. So thank you for joining us this morning and sharing some thoughts with our teachers from literally around the world. No pressure, but we have teachers now from 48 states and 36 countries that are joining us, and many people are sharing where they're joining in. You know, we have people joining us from Mexico City, we have people from Greece. So there are a lot of people who are joining in live, and yeah, we are glad that you are here, and welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'd like to welcome everybody. Of course, how's everyone doing this morning, afternoon, evening? Isn't it just amazing we can have these kinds of live worldwide events? I'm very much old enough to remember a time when if people met, conference, interview, summit, anything, it had to be in person. We needed to hang up giant posters in the conference room because PowerPoint wasn't a thing. Really, not too long ago, all of these kinds of summits were in person. So I'd really like to take this time to thank the National Foreign Language Center, or NFLC, the Professionals in Education Advancing Research and Language Learning, or PEARLL, the University of Maryland, anyone who was involved in helping to make this virtual summit a free summit. It really makes a difference. By their very nature, these kinds of conferences, they're inequitable. Making this a Monday, Tuesday meant some of us had to take time off of work to be here. And I see you. If this conference had been over weekend days, those of us with children would have had to make some difficult choices. And you know what, it's the summer, kids are probably not in school anyway. So I'm sure some of us are here making those choices today. I see you, I see all of you. Those of you who stayed up late to be here, those of you who woke up really early, all of us who are using our precious summertime days to take part in this summit, thank you for being here. And thank you, NFLC, for making it happen. As ACTFL Teacher of the Year, I've had the amazing fortune to attend more conferences this year than I ever have in my life, both virtual and face-to-face. I personally can't really afford to go to a lot of conferences. I'm not at an institution that will cover the costs, if any. And my husband is from Yemen, where I used to live. I don't want to get too political today, but let's just say spending money on a conference, helping family out in Yemen, the choice is pretty obvious. If you want to know more about what's happening in Yemen, I'd suggest watching The Hunger Ward. It's an Oscar-nominated documentary about the ongoing famine in Yemen. But to get back to conferences, even with these fiscal kinds of barriers, I've always tried to budget to go to conferences. I think they're really, really important. Summits, colloquia, whatever you want to call them. Learning about new research into language learning and teaching. It's a great way to revitalize ourselves, our classrooms. Conferences are a great way to start new collaborations, to meet new people. If we stop doing this or start thinking along the lines of, you know, I know everything there is to know, my classroom is great, I've already done research in this, I don't need any new ideas, I might as well have one foot in my own teaching grave in the cemetery of what used to be a fun classroom. So conferences, summits, colloquium, always been great. But this year somehow felt different to me. The excitement of seeing people was palpable. Everybody seemed so thrilled to be alive, to be together. And this includes, by the way, the online conferences where we even had virtual karaoke sessions. This excitement of being together, the happiness of sharing new ideas, of reaching out and asking for help, all these ways in which virtual conferencing can help solve these equity issues. I've never felt more excited to be a part of all of it. And yet, On the flip side of the coin, I didn't always feel that same excitement in my classroom, to say the least. Going back to face-to-face teaching after a year and a half of emergency remote teaching, I struggled this year in ways I was not expecting. My students were struggling this year. Now, this isn't to say my classroom was a pit of misery or something. No, of course not. Most days were fine. But this kind of happiness, this excitement, this joy to be learning, this curiosity, it wasn't present in my classroom in the same way. Not really since March of 2020, when we all sort of pivoted to, again, emergency remote teaching of one kind or another. And I promise that's the last time I'll be using the word pivot, because that's a word I never want to hear again, personally. Now, conferences are somewhat self-selecting. We're all here because we want to learn something new. We're still interested, but we're also in the middle of what's been termed the Great Resignation. I haven't met anyone who hasn't lost a colleague these past years for any number of reasons: early retirement, changing careers, health issues. It's been really hard. Yes, we've had some wins lately. It's not all this sadness, of course not. The House Appropriations Committee here just passed $15 million in funding for the World Language Advancement and Readiness Grants Program, or WLARA, and thanks to the Joint National Committee for Languages, or JNCL, for their hard work on that. But it can be really hard to see the forest for the trees when your colleague who teaches Italian retired, your school is not renewing their position, which means Italian is not offered anywhere at all within a 500-mile radius of you. It's hard. It can be hard to see these wins with declining numbers of students and languages across the board. This may not be happening at your school. I hope it's not, but it's a national trend we need to face. It's happening at my university, my small corner, where numbers of students taking Arabic are not what they were even 5 years ago, where attitudes towards languages and language ideologies seem to be taking over school boards. Maybe they were always there and they're just more on display, but this seems to be a profession where, because everyone was once a student and everybody's using a language in one form or another, they all think they know what's best in language teaching and learning. And I've felt overwhelmed. To be totally honest, I feel overwhelmed some days, and I don't think I'm alone here in feeling overwhelmed, feeling like my classroom isn't going as well. I'm not conveying this excitement, this interest. People aren't learning like I want them to. What am I doing? And a lot of us are walking away. But not you, not anyone who's here today. Your presence, I think, is proof enough of this. But I think we need to give voice to these feelings just a little bit too, of feeling overwhelmed, as everyone does sometimes, and somehow capture and bottle this excitement of these conferences and these summits, the excitement of what it means to be a language teacher, a languages professional, and make these feelings last the entire year, especially remember them when we have those tough days and these difficult moments. You're going to hear a lot here over the next 2 days, I'm sure, of ways to make your classroom a better place for your students, ways to improve learning outcomes. I want to talk today about ways to make the classroom a better place for you, the teacher, the administrators who have joined us here today. I see you too. We hear so much about student-centered learning. This is important. Most of us got into teaching for our students. We do it for the kids. But it has to be about you too. It has to be. This isn't being selfish, okay? Enthusiasm, it's contagious. It really is. So what I'm gonna say today, nothing you haven't heard before, I'm sure. But if you're human, as we all are, we all need to be reassured sometimes that what we're doing matters every single day. We're not just language teachers. We're not just some kind of vehicle for assessing grammar. We're not just mindless grading machines. We're people who are literally teaching other people how to communicate with us and with each other and with the world. How lucky are we? Is there any more important job right now anywhere than to teach people how to communicate? Because if it's really one thing that seems to be in very, very short supply here in the United States right now, and really all over the world, it's communication. Despite these increasing abilities to stay connected, it feels like we're losing our ability to communicate somehow, losing our ability to have conversation, to reach across that aisle and talk to each other, not just shout out barely connected sentences about a topic at each other. So I'm a list person. I'm going to give you 7 ways to keep it going, 7 ways to keep this excitement about being a language teacher last the year. It's all about you. And yes, actually, it's about our students too, because let's face it, when our students are happy, so are we. So the first one, I don't know. No, literally, we have to normalize not knowing the answer and saying, I don't know. Recognizing sometimes there's no clear, obvious choice when it comes to best practices in our classrooms or with anything else. Sure, some things are actually pretty clear. Please don't do it in the classroom what I'm doing right now, just sort of talking on and on. There's not a whole lot of two-way communication here, let's be honest. But some things aren't so clear, and it can be hard to make what some best practices we've heard about at work, in our conferences, make those work in our classrooms. Sometimes our questions about what's considered to be best practices, they don't have one specific one-size-fits-all languages answer. And that's why we're starting to ask and talk about it and have debates. We have to normalize saying, I don't know, and being honest with not knowing the answer in our classrooms, in our professional lives, at conferences, and more than this, we also have to normalize wanting to find out, saying, I don't know, but also I want to learn more. I'll give you an example. DLI. What does DLI mean? If I say I work at DLI, what do you think? I mean, the vast majority of people in our profession are going to say dual language immersion, of course. For me, for years, I thought of DLI when people talked about it. I thought they were talking about the Defense Language Institute, because that's where I learned Arabic, at the Defense Language Institute. And the Defense Language Institute and dual language immersion, they share the same acronym, DLI, and they both have to do with languages. So this confusion on my part with this acronym led to a lot of terrible conversations I've had with people. So I'd like to apologize right now if you're one of those people when I asked, oh, they have DLI in your high school, in your state? Really? Are you sure? Even in kindergarten? Are you kidding? Do they indoctrinate people that early? These are very sort of cringy things to say if we think dual language immersion, but if we're thinking DLI is Defense Language Institute, where every student at the Defense Language Institute is working for the US government in some capacity, it's a little bit more reasonable. But I should have read people's expressions just a little bit better. It occurred to me way too late. Maybe I should possibly ask what they mean by DLI. And I did. And I had a moment where I thought, this person's really going to judge me. This is a cornerstone of our profession, and I don't know about it. But you know what? The judgy McJudgersons are everywhere. You can't let that stop you from asking for more information. People who judge me for asking what I didn't understand. I just, the lucky thing when people do, kind of give me grief about a question that I should know, I just give them a silent blessing and say silently, thank you for telling me who you are before I attempt to ask you for any more advice. Thank you. And I'm just going to keep asking questions and try not to let it bother me, because the subcategory to I don't know is stay curious. We've all heard this before, but when it comes to our classrooms, let me just say my classroom has rarely been more excited than when I asked them what sus meant. Somebody said an exercise we were doing looked sus, and I said, what? Tell me what that means. For those of you who don't know what sus means, it means suspicious. And my son was horrified when he heard me talking about it. He's like, no one uses sus anymore. Language is fluid. But at that time anyways, by good fortune, we were in a unit about food. So I thought everybody seems really excited to talk about what sus means. And I said, okay, instead of talking about what's your favorite and least favorite dishes on this website and favorite and least favorite restaurants, which one looks the most sus to you and why? Oh, suddenly this was a great lesson. Students felt included. It was relevant to them. It was maybe the best Zoom class I had that year. Everybody was participating. For those of you who are curious, by the way, the #1 sus dish was the Big Mac, as it turns out, which was a possibility. I don't believe only in including only Arabic or Arab things in my classroom. I think sometimes it creates artificial barriers. But in any case, this leads me to point 2. Bring students into the discussion. Now, I'm not talking about discussion in the target language. I'm talking about language learning pedagogy. Take a moment, 15 minutes, half an hour, a day, a classroom, to bring students into that discussion about how to best learn a language and what's working for them and what isn't. Take a reflection day in English. It doesn't have to be in the target language. I take entire days at the end of every unit to ask students about this, and I get the most amazing insights. Every year my classroom is a little bit better because of this, and sometimes a lot better. And I really enjoy talking to students about language pedagogy, and they love being thought of as people who have valid ideas and opinions, surprise, surprise. And yes, I do this with middle schoolers too, not just with university students. So I'll give you an example of something that's a little bit of a hot topic right now in language instruction. Should we give students target language names in the classroom? What do I mean by this? My name is Heather. It's the name I was given at birth. But when I was learning Spanish in junior high, my name was Hortensia. When I was learning in high school, it switched to Yolanda. When I started learning Arabic at DLI, my name was Manal. That was the name given to me. I kept that name at Concordia Language Villages when I taught there. I'll be Manal again when I go back this year. And giving people names, it gives things a more immersive feel. We learn names we're likely to hear in the target language. There's lots of reasons for this practice. But is this a best practice or is it a worst practice? Or as with most things in this life, is it somewhere in between? What am I saying to people when I take on the name Manal, that no one named Heather could possibly know Arabic? I have enough issues with that already. Let's just say there's a subset of people who truly believe no non-native speaker could ever learn Arabic. Whatever, why not keep the name Heather? Is it cultural appropriation when we give people target language names? What am I saying when I rename my StarTalk high school student and give him the name Muhammad when his name is Noah? People, I don't have a right answer or a clear answer. I'm not looking for one way or the other. But what I'm saying is people love being asked their opinions on things. Our students are no exception here. So if you're wondering about what to do in a classroom, or if an activity or an idea is appropriate, why not ask the ones it affects the most, our students? But speaking of worst practices, a word of advice, take it from me, sometimes it's best to make a decision and then ask about it at the end. When it comes to the names issues, for instance, if you open it up for the discussion at the start of a semester or a class and then choose to give everybody Arabic names or whatever the target language name is, all the students who are against it will be just so mad at you for the rest of the language learning experience together. Every time you say their name, it's like a dagger in their heart. They may even drop out of the class altogether. Okay, if you ask at the end of the semester, on the other hand, or the end of the course, it's low stakes, the decision was already made. Everybody's more willing to speak up. You get to say thank you to everybody. All of their ideas will be taken into account for future years. Everybody's a bit happier. Make students a part of the process. They're brilliant, but they don't always know the reason for decisions or why they're doing something. Even if the pedagogy seems obvious to us, it's not always obvious to them. And that's why bringing them into this conversation can result in huge changes in classroom attitudes and excitement. And speaking of classroom attitudes, here's number 3. Question and rethink guidelines. They're not strict laws to follow. Nothing is. Not best practices, not anything. You know your classroom. You know your students. You know what works. And it's okay to bend or even break these rules sometimes. Guidelines were made up by humans. Yes, research-based. Yes, good ideas. But sometimes the data's old. Some things about language teaching and learning don't change, of course. Other things will, especially as we do new research and collect new data. So let's talk authentic materials. For example, there's pushback on which dish looks the most sus to you and why, because sus isn't a part of Arabic vocabulary. Yes, we chose an Arabic word that means suspicious, but is somebody in Cairo really going to understand you if you ask them which restaurant in the neighborhood is the least sus? Debatable. Following the strict authentic material only guidelines, I really shouldn't have taught that lesson. But what's going to be better? An authentic material that's maybe at the wrong level and doesn't really reach to your students, or a video or a situation we create for our classroom, maybe not authentic by the strictest of definitions, but something our students will respond to and engage with. I've thrown out so many good materials because they just weren't deemed authentic enough. By me, I was my own gatekeeper. I chose to throw away things because they did not fit the rigid boundaries of by native speakers and for native speakers. But with this definition, we're telling our students, ourselves, our classroom spaces are them inauthentic. That my students looking on talabat.com, an online food ordering service, deciding which restaurants or dishes look the most sus, that's an inauthentic conversation. What are we really saying? Again, this is not an either or kind of a situation. Please, for the love of God, keep using authentic materials. Keep looking for materials that were originally by native speakers, for native speakers. Keep the language you're losing in the classroom, the actual language used by speakers of said language. But these are guidelines. They're just guidelines. Take it from somebody who used to be in the military. Strict, rigid adherence to guidelines is exhausting. It takes forever to find a good novice-level authentic text. No wonder we're overwhelmed. So don't let the best get in the way of the good. It's best to use authentic materials most of the time, sure. But sometimes it's better to keep your own lesson just a little sus and have some fun with the materials you make with your colleagues. Fun is contagious. And speaking of colleagues, number 4, collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. So much easier to find a good novice-level authentic text if 100 Spanish teachers across the nation are also looking for that text. This is not a novel idea, but for some of us, it's easier said than done. Some of our colleagues don't like sharing. Some of us who teach less commonly taught languages, there may not be anybody in your school or district to share ideas with. But no matter where you are or what language you teach, you can find a community of practice. You're in one right now just being here. You can find people to collaborate with. You can meet people at conferences. You can join an ACTFL special interest group. You can join a Facebook group. I learn so much from Jil Jadid every day. People just post Arabic stuff at least daily. That's amazing. And you don't have to pay anything to be on Facebook except, your soul or whatever it is Meta's asking from us these days. But it doesn't even have to be the same language you're teaching. It doesn't have to be that even. I went to a presentation by Bethany Carlson-Drew about chat mats last year. She's a Spanish teacher, but this idea of chat mats changed my classroom. And I asked her questions about my Arabic chat mats, and she's got some great feedback for me. This network of support is necessary, not just for new ideas, but to remind ourselves we're not alone. Those days we're struggling, others are struggling too, or have struggled with the same issue in the past. It's going to take some vulnerability on your part, but reach out. If you can't find the community of practice you want, think about creating one. We're starting a group here in New Mexico, by the way, of language teachers just getting together once a month just to have an informal conversation about, some language issue. And I can't promise this group's going to go anywhere or even get off the ground, but if I only tried things that had a 100% guarantee rate of success, I don't think I'd ever get out of bed. And speaking of days we don't want to get out of bed, number 5 is, and I don't know who needs to hear this today, you don't always have to stay positive. Students can spot phoniness a mile away. We have bad days. You don't have to walk into class with a pretend smile on your face. You're under no obligation to do so. A lot of people tell you, oh no, if you're head, just smile, fake it till you make it. Smiling is contagious. You'll be laughing in no time. This may work for some people. It's never worked for me. And again, students can see through that fake stuff better than everybody else. So take it from me. It's okay to have a bad day, and tell your students, just fill them in. You don't have to overshare or anything. Just say, hey, everyone, you know what? I'm not feeling it today, but we're here. So let's learn something new. Here we go. And that's all it takes. But problems sometimes, if we're having issues, the big ones, they usually don't go away on their own unless we take some ownership of the things we can change, the things we cannot. And that's number 6. We got to play a long game. The problems you can't change, let them pass. Some things we can't help, but don't let them define your career, and work on changing the things you can. There's no overnight solutions for anything. You're not going to go to a conference and find some magic bullet that's going to transform your classroom overnight. Or if you have, let me know, because I'd love to hear it. But really, it's a long game. Teaching is a long game. Let's bring it back to the classroom. I spoke earlier asking students for their opinions at the end of the semester. Why ask students their opinion about something when the semester is over? It's too late. No, it's not for us. That semester will never be over until we retire. If me saying the semester will never be over fills you with dread, maybe start rethinking your classrooms. The feeling I would hope is, hooray, hooray, I got another chance. Everything that didn't go as well as I'd wanted it to, there's always at least one thing, right? We get to do that again and again. We get another chance and another and another. We can change things. It really isn't too late. It's never too late. If you don't like the textbook you're using and you're not the one who gets to decide, you know what? People retire eventually. Maybe make it so that you're the one who gets to choose the textbook in the future. Start having those conversations. Feel people out little by little. We can make these big changes. And it's really exciting when you do. Just trust me. And because really, 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 it's everything we do. It can be challenging. Facing these insurmountable problems or seemingly insurmountable problems we have no control over. We keep hearing things, maybe we're not good enough, we're not in the right position. I don't know anybody who wasn't told at some point, you're not good enough to do this. No, we're all good enough. We all have great ideas, every single one of us. And if we struggle to implement them, things don't go as well as we'd hoped, we keep trying. It's okay. It's okay. And it's so important to keep trying because what you're doing matters. What we're doing as language teachers is so important. We're literally teaching people how to communicate with each other. What could be more important than that? And that is number 7. It's communication, not language. I spoke at the start of this about people shouting out barely connected sentences to each other. This is our classroom some days. I speak too fast sometimes, especially when I get excited. We're still learning how to communicate myself. I have to remind myself the point of a language is to communicate with others, to communicate thoughts and ideas, needs and wants, and to understand others, their ideas, their needs and wants, their stories. Are our grammar drills getting us there? Is learning how to command a group of 3 or more women to use the restroom, which, no joke, was on an Arabic test I once took as a student of Arabic. Is that really going to help me communicate in the language? I hope not. I'm never going to need that word. I mean, I hope not anyways. So the point is that every class asking yourself, am I teaching how to communicate? Not language, but communication. This shift is great for everybody. Whatever you're teaching, don't forget the pragmatics of a conversation, please. Not just what something means, but when to say it. Try analyzing a conversation in English, not the best practice because that's not a target language, but try it with your students. Odds are they've never really thought about how to have a good conversation, how to get out of a conversation, how to start one, what it really means when we say, how are you? We teach these things in our target language, but do students really know how to do this in any language? Do we? How do we get out of a conversation? It's not just saying bye, that's a little strange. So shifting the focus, learning how to communicate, there's no longer this issue of people saying, I'll never use this again, this is useless. Our own feelings sometimes is, what am I doing matter? No, it's so meaningful. What we do matter. What could be more important than teaching how to communicate? It really matters. So to recap, keep the excitement going about your profession all year long, even during those rough patches, because we all have them. What you're doing matters. All of you, everybody. Number 1, normalize saying, I don't know, but I want to find out. Number 2, bring students into these discussions and debates. Let them in on the secrets of pedagogy. Number 3, question and rethink guidelines. It's okay. 4, collaborate. Bounce your ideas off of other people. See if what you're thinking is in line with best practices. Number 5, we do not have to be positive all the time. It's okay. Do not let those bad moments define you or your career. Number 6, play that long game. Fix the issues you can, one thing at a time. Little moves do lead to big changes, which are very exciting. And last but not least, it's all about communication, which I hope I've done today. You all matter, and what you're doing is so important. Thank you so much for being here.
I mute myself, but wow, it was a good thing that I was muted. Wow, thank you, Heather. I mean, I don't know if you could see me, but I was laughing. It was a good thing I was on camera because I was laughing so hard. What a great keynote. What wonderful messages you have shared with all of us, and I know it resonated really with the people watching. So I think those 7 points really apply to what people can even do during the summit, and I hope they take them to heart as they choose their sessions over the next 2 days, and share the thinking. So thank you very much, Heather. Yeah, so that brings to end already our first live session. As a reminder, we have plenty of opportunities for live interactions. We'll be going live again next at the top of the hour with the first podcast recording of the We Teach Languages podcast. And then there's something else happening every single hour. I want to thank you for joining us this morning. Follow us on social media, and we will see you around at the conference.